Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the recessed meeting of the town of Tustin. We call the meeting to order. The only business on the agenda is the park project. We recessed from the last meeting in order to move forward with a vote to put out to bid the park project. And I will remind people that it is only the vote to either put out to bid or not put out to bid. It is not an approval of the project until such time that if it is voted to put out the bids come back, and then we would then have to have another vote whether or not to go forward with it. One of the questions that was asked was about the bathrooms, and Jane, you made 4 phone calls this morning.
Yeah, I mean, well, it ended up being 4 phone calls to the state to ask them if we could use portable toilets. And they said that we could do that now, use portable toilets. They expected that we would hopefully get permanent in the future, but right now we could use portable toilets.
Question to Jane.
Did Jim have give any further elaboration on?
The reason that Jane called the state was when I talked to Jim, he said you need to call the state to appeal a decision of the building code different than the ZBA. Right. It's only the state, and then the state can instruct him what he can do.
And he didn't even say we had to do an appeal. He said we could use it portable.
Is there a time frame?
Oh, well, wait a second, I didn't fully disclose. He said it has to have some hand washing capabilities as well.
Mhm.
And then the code enforcement officer local might put in other stipulations, that would be up to the local code enforcement, like inspections, stuff like that.
Within that, does that mean Jim has the right to veto that?
I don't know.
No, that's coming from the state, but the state did instruct it. They are expecting at some point in time that there needs to be a structure in a bathroom.
But not right away.
Well, not really.
And it would have to have running water as opposed to.
That's a good question. My understanding is the sanitizing station, so.
Would be, that's your understanding, right?
Right, I don't know that it would, I mean, it could have running water though. It would just have to have a tank that would be filled when it's clean. It would have to be on a maintenance program.
And would it have to be heated, or would that go away in the future?
No, it would, as a board, I would expect to remove them for the winter. I don't think we are going, the same thing with the bathroom, if we were to put in a building of a bathroom, that would have to be winterized. I think as a board, it would be better to close them for the winter, it's seasonal.
That's what most parks do,
Okay.
just for one playground.
Lock it up.
Turn off water fountains, right, you're not gonna, I mean, what use is gonna be there? Right. That being, any other questions before I read?
May I ask? Yes, the portalet that is currently down there, what is the maintenance schedule on that?
I just called for that to be maintained. I think what we're gonna need to do is have a porta potty on this where the one is now, but then there's gonna have to be the ones, if a pavilion gets put up, there's gonna have to be the ones by the pavilion. I expect, and I have not asked Jim this, I'm expecting that one of the stipulations is gonna be how many, and including the wash stations.
And we think it would have to be by the portalet, that it's just not sufficient that the park has it?
No, it can be at the park.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry if it made it look like it's gonna be stuck on.
That seems very up and front and center.
Yeah, no, cool.
Thank you.
I think we can, we get to that point, I think we can figure out where we want it, and how many, if we get to that point.
Yeah. I spoke to Jim this morning too, after I spoke to the state. and told him what they said. He said, well, the state says that it's okay.
Thank you.
But today we're just,
So I will go back to the original reason to be here, and that would be a motion to put out to bid for the park project on the drawings that were given to the board for the pavilion with a return date of
Workshop for the record. That is the fifth, regular is 12.
for the fifth. I will put that in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
Greg?
With the understanding that we're still reacting to the bid, I think information is a good thing to get, so I'll say.
Right, and this is strictly to get bids and get it back. It is not an approval of the project until such time the bids come in. We look at it, we decide whether we wish to move forward at that time.
I think information is a good thing.
Crystal?
You're doing 24 by 30 is the last you discussed, is that correct?
The bids that are the specifications that came from the architect.
Just wanna make sure.
Jamie?
Yes,
Yes, Kevin?
I'm a no, I'm for the same reasons I've been
Okay.
discussing it.
I think we get the information. I'm a yes.
Okay. We'll get that out. Any other business before I open public comment?
I just have an announcement. I received, just something, I received something in the mail that says some paper in Hoboken is saying, go to Narrowsburg, it's a great place to visit.
It's a site called Hoboken Girl. And at first I thought that sounded so impossibly precious, but it was actually a really well done piece. A
Yeah.
little history of the
Yeah.
town and
Yeah.
it was, I just, Hoboken Girl, this sounded so whatever, but it was a well done piece. It's right on. It's usually if you're on Google News, it's to the right, you'll find it.
The other little tidbit of news that I have is that the culvert workers, because the Little Lake area's drained, so they've been finding artifacts. So that's kind of fun, which will be given to the history room.
Yeah, didn't Linda welcome find some or?
Yeah, I showed you the pictures of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's a mud larger now.
there's some bottles of embalming fluid, it says.
Wonder where they came from, Rasmussen.
Well, that's good for the.
Well, yeah, because wasn't the Chinway? The Chinway
That was the
original.
That was the original funeral home, so it's
Yeah.
right there, you know.
Yeah.
It was like a casket factory.
That's right.
Toss them on their way home.
Yeah.
That's all my statements I have. to
Any other comment from the board? Open the floor to public comment. Sorry, Michael, ladies first.
Yes,
I'm
please.
sure that people weren't able to see the Democrats. They're on the first mailing of the Damascus playground. And they have places for the children in the playground. I don't call it generational, I call it a playground. And there's only that one thing, you know, the kids go up the stairs, down the slide, up the stairs. Yeah, but you didn't have a chance, so I just wanted to put that out.
Michael?
Well, as I told Bruce on the way in, this feels like the baseball game that got rained out and then rained out again. So we're here for the rescheduling game. Once the grant train started to move down the track, there didn't seem to be much discussion of alternatives to a pavilion. And listening to all of the comments that have come up and hearing all of them, the biggest complaint seems to be shade or lack thereof. You go down there, it's wide open, there's no place to sit, no place to be comfortable. There are, since that seems to be an overwhelming complaint, there are alternatives to a full-on pavilion, such as a sunshade sail. This was just taken randomly from Amazon, which is not necessarily the best source of anything. But as we can see, this can be accomplished for $75, $100, and you have shade.
Thank you. Patty?
So, I guess I'll come up here so I can address the board. Okay. So to follow up on last, 2 days ago, the controversy that many of us felt that there wasn't transparency about this grant. Okay. So what I want to say is that, you know, yes, mentioning at a board meeting that you're applying for a grant, approving a pavilion down at the flats, you know, talking about it in that way is one thing, but I want to say the devil is in the details, because had the public known that the details of this specific grant was the size, the kitchen, the bathroom, and most importantly for me, commercial use, renting it out. So for me, that is equivalent of our problems with having a public bathroom down there, renting it out for commercial use. I also want to say that I know I mentioned at the last meeting that the park has been around for 50 years. I believe a precedent has been set for the use of that park. There's been many negative comments of like, well, if you, why did you build a house next to a park? You know, well, many of us don't live like right next to the park. We live in the surrounding area of the park, in a rural, residential, beautiful area down there. My concern is that Main Street is going to start creeping down there if we open it up in this magnitude with the size, the bathrooms, the amenities. I'm all for the youth program using, you know, having a space for themselves. I used to work for youth programs. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've worked in Sullivan County for many years advocating for the youth. So I am not against the youth, but I am against Main Street commercial use creeping down into the flats. It's never been used that way for 50 years. We need to pause, go back to the drawing board. If it happens that this whole thing is going to be a pavilion that down the road, maybe not now, we don't need a bathroom, but down the road, there's going to be a bathroom. What's next? And are we going to have to rent out the pavilion to pay for said bathroom? Question. Please go back to the drawing board on this one. Please vote no. Thank you.
Can I ask a question quickly, Ben?
Yeah.
Patty, before you step down.
Yes.
When you told, I think one of the dangers here is we all have different definitions of terms that get used,
Yeah.
right? So when you say commercial use,
Mhm.
what does that mean to you, and what is the concern you're expressing? Because that's a broad term.
Sure. Is renting it out for, then you said at the August 8th meeting, it would be kind of like Lackawaxen, what they do in their pavilion. And that was like, whoa,
bad
because I've been to
Yeah, that-
Lackawaxen in their
that was
pavilion. I know what they do down
Yeah,
there.
no, that was a bad example.
Okay, very bad example.
Yeah.
So that got my hairs, you know, it's like, oh no, we can't do this down here in the flats.
That was,
Okay,
I was more comparing or attempting to compare what we do like here, when residents use it for here to down there. You know, concerts, car shows, no. When I went on the list at Lackawaxen, I started to see what they had there, and it was kind of like, yeah, that's not gonna fly with it.
and the key word is residents, okay? Because if you open it up, I'm familiar with other parks, Circle Park, I mean, I've lived in this area all my life, I'm familiar with all the other parks that are around here. You open it up for, oh, anybody can come rent it. Who is gonna monitor that? What's gonna happen? A group comes in, there's 100 people down there, and somebody else wants to use the park, so it's closed. It becomes, when I say commercial, it becomes a money-making commercial entity, and it's not congruent with what has been there for 50 years. So there's a precedent has been set about the use of that park, and what the board is trying to do now is come in and reinvent the use of that park. So, you know, the neighbors, you know, you have a lot of elderly people, the Krauses, the Rasmussens, they all signed the petition of, the original, for the original plan. And they didn't even know, because they're not, they're not on the internet. They're not, if there's no really public, and that's when I say the transparency. It's one thing of saying, oh, we're going for grant. Great. What's in the grant? How do you get access to the, so a lot of us had to do some digging. And I just think that had we had this conversation, had we had this information a couple months ago, we wouldn't be at the last inning, we wouldn't be here today, all feeling stressed out, rushed, in a contentious manner. And it's not what we're all about. So I really urge the board to reconsider, what we're voting on here and how it's going to impact us. Okay, please. It's kicking the can down the road. Well, we can build in the future. We have to build the bathroom. Let's not tie ourselves into something that we're going to regret. Thank you.
Could I just make one more suggestion? When you talk about the rental process, I've gone on quite a few municipalities' websites and checked how they go about that. And there is a process that requires approval. There is an application to do so. It is monitored, and I think there has been some discussion about how that would happen. We can't give you an answer right now, but that did calm my concerns just a little bit to look on some of those websites.
Thank you.
So it's not the wild, wild west. I apologize to anyone who has ever lived in Lackawaxen. I'm not familiar with their park department, but or what those are used for. But there does seem to be a vetting possible of what is appropriate and therefore approved and what is inappropriate. And then the other thing about that would be, number one, I think now the capacity of the shelter is 36 people. If you say 6 people at picnic tables, so it's considerably smaller in terms of scope that might be approved related to the pavilion if it goes forward. But there's also a fee for residents, which is significantly less than non-residents, which might drive people's choices as well. Those are the variables I've learned about. So just want to make sure you have all the information.
So to follow up, go ahead, Ben.
I think, Greg, one of the things that the board should probably do, is speak to the committee chairperson for the Parks Committee and ask for, by the next meeting, to have a layout before we vote on any bid specs that come in, how this is going to be, how this is going to work, who is going to be able to rent the pavilion, who is going to be able to hold an event. And when I say event, I mean like a birthday, soccer match, or
A policy and procedure.
thank you. A policy and procedures with the possibly even with a fee schedule at that point, would have it to the board before the vote, so that we know what we're doing with that. That's it.
I think that's a fine step.
Yeah, and I guess the other point would be, are we building something that we have to rent out in order to pay for it? Once people, Hoboken, hey, people for Hoboken are coming here now, all right? So somebody from Hoboken wants to come down and rent on the residential park in our neighborhood. That's an issue. How are you gonna say, well, you're from Hoboken, you can't come, it just, and that's almost like a full-time job. Who is going to monitor?
That's, yes.
That's like where we are inviting
The same
and
person
opening
that
ourselves.
monitors here, it's gonna fall to the clerk's office.
It's just one of those things, you already had something on the basketball court where somebody set up a clinic and the people who were playing there said, hey, we don't want you, we're playing it. We don't have the staff, we don't have a rec department, we don't have a guy with a whistle. And do we want to have a guy with a whistle? And, can we afford a guy with a whistle? These are I don't want to be negative, I don't want to be Mr. No, but these are the reservations I have.
Thank you. Yeah.
And Patty, I'm not trying to talk you out of your opinions. I'm just telling you that's what I've learned.
Yeah. No, I'm glad there's some thought behind it. Thank you. And it's just like, I want to go back to the original question. Do we need it? Do we need to rent it out? If it's just for the local people, just come use it. You know, and I'm all for, if the youth need to use it, fine, that's local, that's part of this, fine. You guys use it, but my question is, people from Hoboken, people from wherever.
I don't necessarily think that we need to rent it out, but I think it needs to be scheduled if there's events so that people know.
I can tell you that this past year, there was 4 different birthday parties that happened down there. That people called the town and said, oh, do you rent out the playground? Or do I need to get approval to utilize, have a birthday party? The town doesn't have a rental or anything else. So in that aspect, well, there's a lot of extra garbage those days.
And I gotta, yeah,
And
we need to
the
think
awareness
this
of the
before
town,
what we wanna do, because, you know, if we're gonna charge,
yeah.
you know, how do you tell a resident, no, you can't, but I think that's what the committee
They
needs
just
to bring
showed up and
back.
had their birthday party.
Committee
there
needs
was
to bring
no-
that back to the.
There was
to the board.
Yeah, I was down there, there was like 200 kids down there, the one last month. Yeah, there was a lot of people down there, so. All right, thank you for listening and please consider.
Val?
I had a question on what was said.
So my question about the vetting process is that that's also assuming that somebody is going to follow the rules or that they think to check if there's rules in place. What about people what's to stop somebody, a group of 20 people from just showing up and having a party there, bringing their own grill? I mean, I grew up on Long Island across the street from a park. There was no pavilion, no space, no grills. It wasn't, the purpose of the park was not for that. It was really just like ponds with ducks and you could walk through. But one time there was a family that brought their own grill, their own speaker, and they were having a little party and cookout in the park, which you're not supposed to do. So who's gonna be monitoring that and making sure and enforcing the rules? Do we have something in place for that? All right?
Thank you. Yes, Iris.
Catherine Andrews wanted to create a mixed-use proposal for the flats. It was completely vetoed by the ZBA because the town was, the flats were very emphatic about it being residential. And you know, it is a mantra of mine that the flats are residential, not commercial. Once you open the door, you cannot close that door again. Once you let the genie out of the bottle, the genie does not go back into the bottle. Who is to say if somebody has a commercial thought, enterprise, whatever, to use in the flats, how are you going to differentiate this commercial from that commercial? The flats are residential if you want to have birthday parties, just like when there are parties that were down here when the kitchen was usable. Just because there are parties, you ask, I'd like to use yada yada. And the town says, okay, we know you're going to use it, about how many people, fine. It's still residential. It's still something that is not for commercial use. Commercial is commercial, residential is residential. And you can't combine the two and expect it to stay residential. It really is a residential park. As an educator, as a teacher for 31 years, as a supervisor, as a parent, as a grandparent, I love children. It is not about saying no to children. God knows I would not have been a professional involved with that for my entire professional career. It is about changing the dynamic, the entire purpose of an area to something that you can't ever close the door on again. Once it's open, it's open. Thank you.
You are welcome. Doreen.
Sorry, I didn't go up before. I just
We're
wanted
given
to
exemptions.
wanted to say about the pavilion. Now, I probably live the closest to the playground. And a couple of years ago, granted, not recently, but there used to be a crew and I'd wake up. My husband never heard anything and I go into the bathroom and the language and this is 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I wouldn't wake him up because I knew he'd go over there. And who knows anymore what these kids are like. And that's a big concern of mine. You know, if you build it, they will come. Yeah.
Anyone? Yes. Susie.
Good morning. Thank you very much for putting this recess meeting into place. I really appreciate all of you attending here this morning and taking the time to go back and contact the state. And I think before a shovel is put in the ground, I think it would be prudent to get the classification of the structure, the area of assembly from the state in writing. It's a very difficult area to figure out, does this qualify as a grandstand as an area of assembly, which has different regulations than, you know, if it was another type of structure. So there's a lot of different classifications within the code. And I think it would be prudent to get this classified because specifically, it doesn't appear that the word pavilion or gazebo appears, but it seems to possibly fall into the grandstand classification. If that's the case, it would just be nice before a shovel is turned that the town has that from the state and, you know, we know where we stand presently and then in the future. Thank you.
More from the floor. Do you have anybody on Zoom?
Yes, Mary is the first one.
Okay.
Okay, great. Hi, guys. Thank you for everything that you do. I normally don't speak up at any town board meetings because I'm on the planning board, but I do have a question for the board itself. Considering the fact that I do citywide events, I'm in charge of a lot of different youth events. Number one, I deal with a lot of permitting process, whether it be local or city or state-wise. My question to the board, and I don't know if this is apropos to ask, you know, if you're thinking about renting or, you know, allowing some type of party or gathering, most of the times, and I don't know if this is, appropriate for the town, is whether or not who carries the insurance. Because the liability, and I know we're a small town, I know that we have insurance and all that details that I don't need to get into. But sometimes you have to have a certificate of insurance holder. And my concern is it's more about the taxpayers rather, yeah, and the cost to it. Now, also, one other question is that I do a lot of grant writing for the city, for many different organizations. My question to you is that, is the Tustin Youth a 501c or is it the town? Because I would like to forward as many grants that I get, and I get a lot of them right now, to whoever I need to, because some of them are very appropriate, not only for the Youth Commission, but for the town itself. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Okay.
If you can forward those to me, we have to be involved.
Yeah, you are, let's see.
We do have, it was made years ago and we are in the process of trying to wake it back up and find it. So Tustin Youth Committee is town. There is a Tustin Youth 501c3 as well. So we have both.
Thank you. And what about the insurance question that I did ask?
The one as far as if somebody was to utilize the pavilion, they would be required to have a certificate of insurance.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, everybody. Thank you for all your assistance.
All of those questions should come also out in the committee when they put together a policy and procedures.
That's certainly true. People who use the library meeting in all three
Right.
branches,
They
they have to have insurance if something.
Any of the festivals.
The chess club of whatever meets, they have to.
I think Lisa, I got still some on Zoom. Lisa?
Hi, thank you. So I just wanted to raise, I think it was Jane that said that there was an article in the Hoboken newspaper about telling people to come to Tustin, it could come to Narrowsburg. It's a great area. We are happy that that article was written, yet we're not doing anything as a town to draw more families and more individuals here, make it more comfortable for them to come here. Everybody's against the bathroom. Everybody's against doing a pavilion. Why not? It's actually, I cannot believe that everybody is against making our town better. The pavilion will make it better, not just for our residents, not just for the families in town, but also for visitors that come. Perhaps we would have more business, more individuals come to Narrowsburg if there's a place for their children to play. If they go on Main Street, they have lunch, and then they go down to the flats and play there. They're not going to stay for hours upon hours, as somebody is alluding to, that it's going to, you're going to bring the commercial business from Main Street down to the flats. You know, everybody keeps saying, also, the other thing is, if everybody is completely against the pavilion and keeps saying that this is a residential area and it needs to stay residential, well, then I have a proposal. How about the town sell the land to a developer to build residences, build homes there, get rid of the flats altogether and put buildings. If everybody wants it to remain residential, then go ahead and do that and get rid of the park completely. Now your house is going to be across the street from another house. That's all that I have to.
Iris?
So this may be a little tangential. However, if we are talking about, let's just say, this space here. It was not too long ago that this space here had an available kitchen. Is there anything being done to bring back? And I understand there are plumbing issues, there may be some structural issues, but that's not going to
Yeah,
cost tens of thousands.
I know you're going with the kitchen, yes. There are plans on that. We have just purchased, within the last 5 or 6 weeks, a container in order to move the items that are in the kitchen to the container. The horse just got moved yesterday, so now I can get highway to move move that container so that the kitchen then can be redone. Or not redone, so that the stuff can come out of the kitchen. Buck Moorhead Architect has started his interviews here in town in order to determine the best use of our space. The work within the kitchen to get it open back up is going to be contingent on what his report shows to us and how much space we need, because that'll determine how much community space we have left downstairs after we figure out what we need for offices. I've been in touch with the Meals on Wheels program, Jane Bozan, and I told her that we were in the process of getting stuff done so that we can get the Meals on Wheels back here and the nutrition site back here in this town hall. So
That is very positive news to hear. I'm really very glad to hear that, because the space has been improved. The bathrooms certainly have been improved. I'm glad to know that there is forward momentum now to make this kitchen viable, usable. Thank you.
yes, stop.
So I did look up the park that I was referring to that I grew up across the street from. And I didn't know that this was a thing, but it's considered a passive park. So there is a difference. Nassau County has active parks, which are large, offer diverse activities and heavily used by the public, which tend to have full-time on-site staff, and passive parks, which are far smaller and limited to local usage, in many cases consisting of a single athletic field or small green area. So I feel like this is something to consider since it's in a residential neighborhood. It is more of a passive park. That's how it's always been used. And now if we're going to turn it into an active park, it does require some sort of staff and maintenance, and we are changing the use essentially of a park. So it's not something to be just taken lightly, I feel like.
Anyone else from the floor? If not, from Zoom? Final board comment?
I just have a board question. I just want to hear more about the horse protest.
I was gonna be funny and say, yeah, Jonathan. Yeah,
Saddled up.
they came in, unhooked the electric from it,
So it's in Liberty.
it's in Liberty.
Well, good.
It is-
Hooray, hooray, hooray.
That's great. So it's gonna be, it's found a better home and
Yes, it's found a home that'll use it much more,
That's great.
And by Cornell co-op.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
Rolling Stone has got it out there right.
I was just worried about something happening to it and you know?
No, so that space has been freed up to allow the larger container to be put there, so. I spoke to Don, he said absolutely was not happening this week, the guys are out paving roads for the other towns, but he would get to it as soon as he can.
That's good.
Two things. As the committee looks at the policies that we've been discussing, could we also nail down where those portalets would be put as part of the scope now? And could we also have some discussion about to Doreen's point, about after-hour policies? What could we put in place to discourage those things and create accountability? I've been, obviously, we've all been thinking about this pavilion a lot. And if we were all paid for the time the word pavilion is mentioned, we would be through the grant already. But, I thought about it long and hard, and I thought, if I didn't live on the flats, would I still have the same opinion? And would I still have the same concerns? And I would, because it is more than, I care about safety and how things are going in Beaverbrook. You know, so as a community, I think we do tend to look out for each other. I'm concerned about that. Sometimes I walk past the park and I just aware of my own responsibility and the safety of my neighbors. If I see someone in the park after hours, I tell them the park is closed. And my ferocious little dogs bark a little bit.
You can borrow Corky if you need.
Then we'd have a different. Anyway, it would be nice to have those things taken into consideration, because when those things happen, it feels a little overwhelming and as though you're alone in the concern. So to know that there are some steps in place would be helpful and encouraging. Thank you.
And I mean, we do have the comments that have gone on over the last several meetings. I would encourage people that have concerns as far as what they would like to see in a policy to email us that, either the town clerk or myself. Again, we're putting something together that may or may not come to fruition, but I think before we have any vote on the structure, then we know how we're going to be utilizing it. So, I mean, you've got the ability to let us know what you want in that. It gets voted down, and we just did extra work to, I think that was required in order to.
And also they can provide the context for the decision, right? These are first steps that may evolve,
I mean,
but
I-
it's an idea of things.
And I don't think that those policies would be wasted, because like I said, there are people that have been calling our office and asking people.
Well, I'm a little
So-
disappointed right now because I know that, Peter Gabriel probably won't be playing the flats this year.
Maybe a tribute, even Peter Gabriel tribute.
Boomer music is how you keep kids away.
And Donald Trump won't have his rally.
Well,
I
you
think
know-
we don't need to recess anymore.
There is a pavilion, a kitchen with bathroom facilities. Nobody rents it.
Where?
At our firehouse in Lava.
Oh, yeah.
There's a pavilion there. There's a kitchen, there's bathroom. People don't want to pay the insurance to rent it. There sits a perfectly good pavilion.
How would you like a new pavilion?
No.
50 by 30, put it in for free.
And
Yeah. We have a grant.
I understand the pine trees were taken down, so there went your shade. You need some sort of a shade spot.
Yeah.
That's a given. But worried about people renting it, even if it happens, people don't rent the one that's in the area now. I don't think it's been rented in probably 10 years. Nobody wants to pay that insurance money. All right, and then, like I said, if someone wanted to rent it, there's a perfectly good pavilion right there, but nobody does.
What a good point.
And I would be concerned about Main Street coming down on the flats too, because my mother lived there for a long time. And it is nice and quiet. Best thing that happened was the garden was taken down, because that was just a weed festival. All right, so, and it looks better without it there, but get all the information, get plans, see what. I'm kind of on the fence, and I don't live on the flats. But my mother did, so, it would be concerning. I like to see the idea that the ball field is gonna be utilized again, because that sat idle for many years. I'm glad that that's coming back around, because our kids, my little guy, our grandson would love to play baseball, but I'm not going all the way to Liberty for him to play baseball. Things like that. I think it's gotta take a slow roll. There's just certain concerns. You put a restroom down there, people from Main Street gonna come down there and use that restroom and overload it too. It's things you gotta kind of think about that way.
Father has a policy for renting.
Yeah, somewhere in the archive papers, I'm sure there is.
Reach out to Amy.
Dust it all.
Yeah, you'd have to talk to Amy. She would know where that stuff is. But it's been a long time since anybody ever rented that.
They
pavilion.
rent-
15
they
years
rent
ago.
them.
15 years ago. But there's one in town already that doesn't get used.
Bruce, could you do a little research and just see what kind of numbers they quote people for what the insurance would cost?
Well, that's what I'm gonna do.
Oh, you're gonna do that?
Well, as part of the committee.
Great.
Yeah, I'll look in the library thing, that they charge.
Okay.
And it'd be my feeling, I wouldn't be renting something on the flats out to people from Hoboken or anywhere else. It should be your own community.
That's what this policy can do.
It should be just your own community members, not just having some big shindig down there and, sure, the youth needs something to get under. If you're at that park, you need something to get under. It's, if you want to have a little birthday party for your kid and you have 15 of their friends over, and you sit down on picnic tables and blow the candles out. That's kind of what I would tend to think it should be like.
Thank you.
Sure.
Does the town must already have insurance on that park?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
we have insurance on the park, on the youth committee events.
And our firehouse is insured too, but we required people, even if someone uses the fire hall itself, they gotta get a certificate of insurance to cover it.
Takes liability.
Takes liability off of us.
And we have had programming in the park recently that has required people to get their own certificate of insurance.
And that's true, when Riverfest happens.
Yeah, every festival of the-
Bee festivals, they always have to get their.
Thank you.
I think we can actually do an adjourn. Yes.
I just have a question. So what is your next step going to be?
The next step will be that the plans that we saw that came out of the facilitation will go out for bid. The board will receive those bids. At that point, the board has to determine whether they wish to go forward based on the bids.
And also the committee will have
Well,
to
the
present.
The committee is going to present to the board before that takes place, even if it's at the meeting, what policies and procedures they feel would be best for the park, so that the board could look at that prior to any.
So the playground committee is going to be giving their recommendations to the board.
To the board for a policy. And then that policy obviously will be tweaked by the board for what they want.
So are there going to be further renderings or plans? Do we have to hire
For the policy? No, the policy I think can be done by the committee.
Okay.
But again, I would encourage anybody other, we've already got what you've said, but if you feel that you want it said again, then just email us and I'll forward that to the committee.
Are the plans on the website?
Yes, this is all on from the last meeting, it's all on there.
Great.
So the bids are due back when?
If we get no bids, then it has to go back out to bid.
So that's for the
Pavilion.
For the pavilion at the workshop meeting?
Yes.
Okay, the workshop meeting then is the pavilion.
Yes. I would use the workshop meeting.
Excuse me.
Being the one to come to.
What is the date?
They're all
September
fashioned.
fifth.
Is Labor Day the fourth?
Yeah.
Before we close, I feel like we should say that the town of Tustin, New York harbors no ill will to the people of Hoboken and
Only the girls.
It was for visiting, not for,
It was a nice piece.
Right.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.